Welcome to Keep the Game Beautiful podcast. Each week, I highlight incredible people who are doing amazing things in soccer, the beautiful game. I'm Anna Turi, your host. Thank you for listening. Today's guest is Yael Averbuch. So Yael has a huge accomplishment, also one of her accomplishments being the founder of Techne. Today, I didn't really discuss Techne. I really wanted to focus on the other amazing parts of her life. She's had such an amazing playing career and is a great role model for many young women. These past 2 Sundays, I've been participating in a Molly Grisham experience, a leadership experience. I always learn so much with her. In just a 2-hour session, I took probably 5 pages of notes. On episode 13, I talked with Molly Grisham on the podcast. It was around New Year's time, so we talked a lot about setting goals and New Year's resolutions. I encourage you to go listen to that if you're interested in anything related to leadership. I hope you enjoy the episode. Today's guest is Yael Averbuch. She played at the University of North Carolina, winning 2 national championships, 105 consecutive starts, and scoring the fastest goal in women's collegiate soccer. She got her first cap on the U.S. Women's National Team in 2007 and continued to go to multiple national camps. In 2010, she became a permanent member on the team. She played abroad, WPS, and the NWSL. Yael started Techne Futbol and the NWSL Players Association and is now the executive director. Is there anything else you'd like to share about yourself?
No, you did it. You did a great recap. I appreciate it.
On this podcast, I always start with the same 3 questions. First, what does the beautiful game mean to you?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. So I think for me, I think when I started to realize the true meaning of the beautiful game was when I realized that it was so much more than just my own playing career and getting better and trying to achieve my goals. And for me, the fact that this is a game that connects people all over the world of all backgrounds, physical characteristics, speaking all different languages is one of the most special parts of my experience in the game, and I think the game as a whole. So I think that's what makes it beautiful, is that you can be from anywhere, you can have any background, any type of skill set, and still take part and enjoy the beautiful game.
What are actions or things you do to keep the game beautiful?
Well, I hope I'm contributing to keep the game beautiful. I think for me, I love what has been so special to me about my own career is the relationship I've developed with the game. So I love sharing that with other people, and whether it's mentoring younger players who want to eventually play at a really high level, or just enjoying the game and being a fan with others who similarly enjoy the game. I try to use the game as a connector and to bring people together and form communities of people who appreciate the beautiful game in the same way that I do.
How do you encourage others to keep the game beautiful?
I think it's about always remembering what's most important. It's easy to get caught up with my team won or lost, or I made the team or I didn't, or I'm trying to achieve my goals and falling short, or even achieving them. And at the end of the day, it's about more than just what happens on the field. And so I think that that's always a good reminder for us all. And I'm reminded of that quite often through even recently with the NWSL Challenge Cup in Utah. I think, the players used that platform to make it about so much more than what was going on the field in a lot of different ways. And so I think that's always the message, is that let's take the bigger perspective here and realize what sport, and especially soccer, gives us in our life, and how that is what makes it the beautiful game. It's not whether you scored a nice goal, or your team won, or you made the national team, or whatever it is. It's that greater joy and the greater understanding that the soccer community shares.
I had read a little bit back that you played on an all-boys team when you were younger. Why was this something that was so impactful to your playing career?
Yeah, well, at the time, there weren't quite as many opportunities as there are now for girls who are really elite. So now there are tons of clubs in New Jersey where I grew up that you could play for. But at the time, I would have either had to drive pretty far to play for a more elite girls team to challenge myself, or I could stay right in my town and play with the boys because I was really looking for a kind of that next challenge. I wanted to keep getting better, and I was improving quicker than some of the girls my age who were local. And for me, that experience was very socially challenging, first of all, because it was kind of middle school ages. So as I'm sure you can imagine, it was very awkward to be the only girl on that team. But then also just, I was certainly at the bottom of the pack in terms of all aspects of the game. So I was having to play more quickly, learn new skills, get faster, get fitter, do all the things to kind of try to keep up rather than what I might have been able to do if I was on a girls team of my age players, which is kind of like I probably would have been able to coast a little bit. So I was really, really challenged as a player. And also this was the first time in my career where I was really outside my comfort zone. Like definitely showing up every day was a difficult, uncomfortable situation. So I think it made me a better player, but it also made me, a tougher person mentally and emotionally.
If other girls or young women don't have good clubs in their area, is it important for them to consider playing on a boys' team?
I mean, I think it's important to consider even if you do have good clubs in your area. I think, playing with different players of different ages, boys versus girls, players who have come from other countries or coaches who have come from other countries, it can only make you a better player. There's so many skill sets to be learned. So if you're always playing with people your age, especially say you're a girl growing up and you're always playing with girls your age for the same coach, you're missing out on a huge experience in the game. So I think certainly if you're kind of in an isolated area and looking for a more elite situation than you have, to at least train with a boys team or train with boys is really good. But in general, the more different players you can play with, the more players who are maybe at a higher level than you, and the more coaches you can play for, the better the player you're going to be because the more full your experience will be.
So there obviously had to be a huge drive towards getting better, playing with boys, and just going as far as you did. Were you always this driven?
I think driven, if you had to pick some words that characterize me, I think driven would be on the short list for sure. I think, it's part of my natural personality in anything I do. So even from a very young age, the stories my parents tell me, and I do remember being really serious at a young age. So much so that sometimes people would look and be like, oh, she's going to burn out, or that's weird or whatever. And I was kind of like, certainly, I think certain people judged it to be like not a healthy amount of drive for a person of that age. But honestly, it's pretty natural to my personality. I wasn't being forced to do anything. I think it wasn't unnatural for me. It was just my mindset to approach what I did. So I really have always, I think, been very driven in anything I do, and it still exists today. Like I can't do anything casually. It's just not in my nature. So I realized that more and more about myself is that, since I started playing, my approach has been to take the most ambitious route possible and to push myself as much as possible because it's the only way I know how to do anything I do.
Even though you were driven, did you still have those days where you wanted to quit or you didn't want to try as hard anymore?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I would say that very, very few times did I want to quit. I do remember a couple times where I would get really upset because somebody was better than me or had a disappointing experience. And early on, I thought, like, why am I doing all this if they're still better than me? It was actually a funny story. I had a birthday party. It must have been like, I don't even know what age I was turning, but I had a birthday party and invited a lot of my friends from school, and a bunch of them were boys who played, and they were so much better than me in my mind at the time that I was really discouraged. I remember following my birthday party in the next few days, I was so depressed because, I was working really hard and they were so much better than me. I mean, I was not older than 12. So I think this is like a funny thought process now, but that I remember crying and being like, why am I even doing this? And kind of thinking like, is this worth it? But very few times did I feel that I might give up. I certainly felt very discouraged at times, felt very frustrated. kind of like downtrodden, things didn't go my way. I was putting a lot into it. So if I didn't make a team or I got cut from, at a national team camp or got some harsh criticism from a coach, I was really, really sensitive to it. And it was very tough. But through that kind of, I think my mindset, which was very important, was like, okay, this is tough. I really don't like this, but, I feel bad for a couple of days and then back to work. And that has always kind of been the way I've approached it. But my career has not been without many of those days and many tears and a lot of frustration. I can't say that it's all been smooth, and I've loved every single day of it.
So I kind of wanted to talk a bit about like getting cut from a national team camp or from any team in general. What advice would you give to someone going through the process of rejection?
Yeah, I think it's so important to realize, like, when you read my bio in the beginning, it sounds really great. It all sounds successful, but every single player, like when I think of my career, I think of a lot of moments. I think of some good ones, and I also think of some really, really tough ones, like the ups and downs. And I think it's so important for players who are going through something like that to realize that every player you watch on TV or that who's successful has gone through that. It's not, you don't succeed you don't succeed because you've never been cut or been benched or been told you're not good enough. You succeed because you continue on regardless. And so I think, every player who makes it to the top, who we watch on TV, who it looks like they're having all this success, they've gone through those moments too. They've just used them to get better, and they haven't stopped. And I think that's what sometimes players don't realize. They think it's the end of their journey because, they were cut from a team, they were told you're not good enough. That is only like a momentary setback, and it actually can propel you to get to the next level if that's how you view it. But I think that's what I would encourage players to think about, is that those things are only true if you believe it's true, and if it's the end, you believe it's the end for you. And that's what I think, my mindset never let me feel that was the end for me. Like I had coaches tell me, you're not athletic enough to play at the highest level. I was cut multiple times from teams, and it was a moment in my journey. And then I decided, okay, well, I'm going to create some new moments after that. So I would encourage players. I think the best thing we could say is just keep going, keep getting better. Don't view it as the end. The only reason it needs to be the end is if you think of it as the end.
I want to take a bit of a step back. Could you talk a little bit about some of your favorite memories at UNC?
Yeah, there are so many of them. I think for me, a lot of my memories have to do with the people I met there. As I was saying, when I was younger, like this really driven younger kid, and I'm the only girl on an all boys team. I didn't really have friends. I mean, it sounds worse than it was. Like I was happy and stuff, but like I didn't have a friend group. I didn't socialize really. I always felt very different in the people who I was around. And college was the first time where I met a lot of people who were just like me. Like these were all young women in my age range who had the same goals as me. They were just as serious as me and wanted to get better and win just as much as me. And so a lot of my best memories of my time in college is the time I spent with my great friends I met there. So it's funny, I don't think so much about the games and all that. Like I remember time where we were going on the bus to an away game. Like I don't even remember the game. I don't even know where we're going, but I remember the time on the bus. Or, I mean, the games I do remember, the 2 national championships I won were really, really special for various reasons. And those moments I certainly treasure. It was my sophomore year and my senior year. So I got to leave college having won my last college game, which was really special to me. But honestly, I remember from that season, I don't remember much of the season. I remember like going out early before practice with a few of my friends to practice free kicks all the time, or the soccer tennis games I played in between class with my teammates. And that's kind of, to me, what sticks out when I think of my memories of college.
How did you know you had found your fit?
Well, I didn't, to be honest. I didn't at all before I went there. I always wanted to go to UNC as a younger kid. That was my dream. And then when it came time to really decide, okay, like I was in high school, I have to pick what college I'm going to. I did not want to go to college. I didn't want to go to UNC, but then I looked at all the other colleges that I could consider, and I didn't really want to go to any of them either. I think for me, the turning point where there were a couple of things. One, because it was my dream to play at UNC ever since I was young, I knew that I would probably regret it if I went anywhere else. I would wonder, like, what if I, lived that dream and went to UNC? And then I went and visited at one point and watched the team train at UNC, which I did at a lot of other colleges. They all seemed fine, but I didn't really want to go to any of them. And then I actually had gone to visit UNC. I felt the same way about it. And the second time I went, because I was like, I'm running out of options here, I got to figure something out. I watched the team train, and I really felt like, just watching the effort that they were putting in, I felt like I don't think any other team deserves to beat this team. And that for me was the first time I was like, I think I should go here, because I could not really play for another team and think that we deserve to beat this team. And I obviously wanted to be on the best team and be with the best players. So for me, that said a lot. And I think that was a shift in my thinking. And at that point, I'm kind of the type of person where once I decide something, I'm all in, and I know it's right, and I don't ever look back. But that was the point, I think, where I really decided. And before that, I was not very committed to it. I didn't really know what to do or if I wanted to go at all.
Why is a mindset or thinking that you always want to win so important while playing?
For me, it's not even so much like the outcome of actually winning. It's that desire to win, like you just said, and the competitiveness to want to dominate and get the better of your opponent. I think that's important, because that's the gist of like what sports are all about. I think it gives a lot of purpose behind what you're doing, to try to be the best and try to be better than your opponent. And for me, something I learned at UNC a lot was that it shows your opponent respect. Whether it's in training against, a 1v1 against your teammate, or whether it's literally against another team, or even just bettering yourself, it shows respect to give your absolute 100% to try to win when it's a competitive environment. And in doing so, you make yourself better, you make your teammates better, you make your opponents better. But at the end of the day, it's a lack of respect for the sport and for your opponent if you aren't really trying everything you can to win. And I think that really hit home to me, because I think it a lot of times, especially with females, there's a kind of a reluctance maybe to compete and try to win, and it's looked down on. And what I learned in college is like quite the opposite. Like that's respected. That's the way to do it. And even if I am to lose, I'd rather lose by somebody who I know beat me by as much as they could than maybe took it easy on me and still won. So I kind of adopted that mindset in college.
So before we move on, I just wanted to ask you, what was that moment like when you were able to set a record not only for UNC, but for collegiate women's soccer as a whole?
Yeah, I didn't know it was a record at the time. So I honestly was kind of embarrassed. I shot the ball right from the kickoff, which was the record, and I was kind of embarrassed to try it, but my coach was insisting because the goalkeeper was off her line. So I was like, I don't want to get yelled at by the coach. So when it left my foot, I was like, wow, that was actually a pretty good shot. And then it went in over the goalkeeper's head, and we were all kind of laughing. It was just such an unbelievable moment. But I had no idea it was a record at the time. I had no idea anyone was filming it. Like, it was before the day when, everything was filmed. And I certainly had no idea it would be something that I'd be asked about years later. So I really, it was certainly a great moment in the game, and something that we thought was actually pretty funny. But I had no idea at the time that would be something that would kind of be on my resume or anything like that. I didn't even think it was that big of a deal, to be honest.
So moving on a little bit, going into national camps, what were you able to do as the underdog? Was it hard or challenging at times?
Yeah, my experience with the national team was very challenging. I think it started off in a way that was really promising, because it's easy to come in as a young player when you're not expected to make it really, and to just try to belong at all. And so from the beginning, I think I was able to do that. I was able to show that I did have like some of what it took to be in that environment. And I was pleasantly surprised. It was really cool. And then over time, as I was no longer the youngest player and like no longer new, there started to be a lot of pressure to actually, solidify a spot. And I was just never able to quite break in. Like I would do really well in training, then I'd get a chance in a game, and it just wasn't my best. And then I would have kind of like a good training camp, then the not so good one. And it wasn't, I was doing the absolute best I could. It's just the level of competition. The players there are so, so good. Everybody is literally the best in the world at what they do. So I think for me, it started to really wear on me mentally to always, it was a constant tryout. Basically, I was going to try out for like 6 years. Every single training camp, I felt like if I did well, maybe I could get a little closer and then still be in a tryout. And if I didn't do well, someone else was going to take my spot. So it was like a very tough mental situation. And I unfortunately was never able to quite like get beyond it to the point of being a little more comfortable that I knew I had a spot and was doing kind of better than what I was doing. I would have wished to have like performed a little better in those environments and had a little bit more certainty to my role in the team. But it was certainly a great learning experience. But I have to say, very stressful now that I'm looking back, and not in a bad way. I mean, it's the best stress. This is stress I would do again anytime because it's such an honor. But it certainly was not easy, and it wasn't relaxing.
Why is it so important to support teammates even if you're selected for a roster but you don't get any playing time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is such an important thing because at the end of the day, things are not always going to go your way as a player. And one, if you're part of a team, you need to be valuable to the team no matter what your role is. If you're playing a position you don't like, if you're not playing, if you're cut but then going to be back at another camp, like there's nothing that benefits you or the team from not acting professionally, not acting gracefully in those situations or respectfully to your teammates. And I think, something like that, one, it can actually impact your future on the team. Like if a coach doesn't know if they're going to play you every game or not, and someone's playing instead of you and they know that you're going to have a terrible attitude about it, they're not going to want you on the team. Whereas vice versa, if they know that, you're going to still be an asset to the team and be supportive and actually potentially offer tactical advice or whatever at halftime to the players in your position, that can actually help you when it comes down to picking a roster, if you're going to make the roster or not. Additionally, I just think in general, I always would hope that if I'm playing and someone else is not, that we could maintain a good relationship. Like I would hope that player knows I respect them, and I would hope they would respect me and not be on the bench whispering about me and like hoping I make a mistake or things like that. So I think it's just such an important thing as a teammate is that these are your friends. And quite often for me, it was my very good friends in life who were playing instead of me, or I was playing instead of them at any given moment. So it certainly doesn't help anyone, yourself, the team, or your teammates, to be anything other than supportive, even if, and that doesn't mean you can't feel frustrated, you can't feel hurt, you can't feel angry. Like those emotions happen. I mean, I felt all those things, but I still outwardly would always act supportive and professional and positive in those times. And I think that's what's so important. It's not to not feel disappointed, not feel anything negative. That's human. If you don't feel that, you probably don't care enough. But your actions you can't control, and that part I think is so, so important.
You had talked about this being a very mentally challenging time. What do you wish you would have known before going into your first national camp?
Wow, actually, I got really good advice before I went into my first camp, and I will always remember this because it was something, if I hadn't gotten this advice, this would be my answer to your question, but I think I was very well prepared because of this. And I forget who told me this, but somebody was saying, like, don't just go there to be there. Like, you never know if you're going to get another chance. So, like, make an impact. Like, don't be afraid to try to be the best player. Like, your mindset going into your first camp. I was playing, Christine Lilly was there, like all these players who I had watched on TV, these were the legends. So it's very easy to go into that environment and think like, okay, I'm just going to kind of hang out. I'm not going to call for the ball. I don't want to like tackle anyone too hard. But no, quite the opposite. Like you never know what chance you're going to get. And you're a player just like them and you're there for a reason. So make your mark. And that kind of freed me to think like, I don't need to defer to anyone. I can be myself. I can call for the ball, demand it, go up and win a header and, make hard physical contact with someone. Like those things are really important and good. And so that was my mindset going in, was like, don't hold anything back. Just be you. Don't be shy to be your very best you can be. And I wasn't like, I was certainly very nervous. I wasn't like amazing or anything, but that really helped me to kind of feel free to just give it my all rather than being too tentative, which I think is some players' mistake when they go into a new environment. They're really tentative, but at the end of the day, in your first camp like that, a coach isn't expecting you to be the best or be the best version of yourself. Even they want to see the tools you have to offer. And by showing that, you can secure yourself another opportunity.
Are there any favorite moments with being on the U.S. Women's National Team?
I mean, certainly my first cap was an amazing, I mean, that was something I had dreamed of literally my entire life. So to put on that jersey and step on the field for the first time was, you know, there's nothing better. And then similarly, I think of before actually a lot of the games, and, you know, alongside the honor of wearing the jersey and seeing, you know, your name on the back of the jersey and the crest on the front, which is such an amazing thing. Every single time I saw that in my locker, I got to put that on. It never gets old. I think alongside that, similar to what I said in college, you know, the trips we went on were stressful. They were long. We were often overseas. And so the relationships I formed and the camaraderie, the laughter and all of that is actually what I remember in great detail beyond a lot of the training and games even, if I'm being honest.
You'd gotten to play all over the world at many different places. What were some of your favorite places to play, and why was that?
Well, I loved when I lived in Sweden and played for a team there, and I loved that. That was one of the best playing experiences I think I had my entire career. In terms of like visiting places to play, I got to play in Thailand when I was on the under-19 national team, and oh my gosh, it was like a tropical. We were staying in like a beach island resort, and then we'd go to training. And now that I think back, I think of how wonderful and free that time of my life was, and like how amazing that trip was. I probably didn't have a more beautiful, enjoyable trip anywhere than that. But yeah, I mean, I feel really fortunate to have, you know, stayed in like a small village in Italy where they were making us all of our food totally fresh, and it was just laid out for us there. And then we'd go to training on these beautiful green grass fields. And I just think about how nice and how easy that seemed, and now how much I would appreciate things like that. And I did appreciate it at the time, but you know, now I look back and I'm like, wow, I was so lucky to be doing that. So there are so many stories. Those few come to mind for sure. I think, you know, Thailand, living in Sweden, going and being able to stay at the resort and play in Thailand for the U19 World Championship, and then like some of the trips to the national team. It's just such a cool setup. And like one time, for example, we were in Germany. We got to go see Bayern Munich play and got to be in the kind of the front row almost of the stadium, and just things like that are just such cool life experiences. And I have a ton of them I could name. Like we could go on for hours about them.
So you played in Sweden. How did you make the decision to play in Sweden?
Well, actually, that was when WPS folded. So the league in the U.S. for women folded and didn't exist. And so I didn't have anywhere to play. So I was looking for opportunities. I played in Russia for about a month, and it was a very bad experience. So I came home after that, and I was looking for something after that that would be kind of easier emotionally. That was a really tough one for me. And so Sweden was a place where I knew, like, I never heard of a player having a bad experience in Sweden. I think every American I knew who went there just loved it. And so because of that, I wanted to go play there. That was kind of top of my list. And finally, after a lot of searching, I found an opportunity on a team that needed a center midfielder. It wasn't easy. It wasn't like there are tons of teams just looking for players. So it wasn't easy, but that's kind of why it was overseas, first of all, but then also Sweden in particular.
So if I'm correct, after that you went to play for Sky Blue in the NWSL, right?
So I played for Sky Blue first, and then Western New York, and that was all in WPS. And then I went to Sweden kind of in between when there was no league before coming back to NWSL.
Okay. So actually playing in Sky Blue, how have you liked seeing all the major changes in staffing and everything?
Yeah, well, I was there like way back in the day in 2009 and 2010, so a long time ago now, which makes me feel kind of old when I say it. But it was interesting because when I was there, this is a story I haven't told much, but when I was there, I remember our first preseason meeting. In the meeting, the talk was like this: let's make this club not just the best in the league, but like the best in the world. Like, let's make this club the club that every player wants to come to. And at the time, I really believed we were all bought in. We had very good players. Like, everyone would want to come live and play in New York, New Jersey area. Like, great soccer culture here. We could do it. And then since then, the club Sky Blue has had a lot of ups and downs. It's been a long time, and I think now we see Elise LaHue, the new GM, as of the last couple of years, and I think the only female GM in NWSL, as well as a female coaching staff, which is really cool. And, the team has put a lot of effort into creating a relationship with Red Bull to be able to play their stadium. Unfortunately, this year didn't pan out as everyone would have hoped with being able to actually play in home team stadiums. But, bringing in new players, there's just been a lot of movement. And I think now the team is really just at the start of something very exciting. And actually, they were one of my favorite teams to watch in the Challenge Cup that just happened. So I'm excited to see the club and the team back on the rise and getting some good results. And I always have a soft spot for my hometown team because I'm from New Jersey as well. So.
How have you enjoyed watching the women's game grow as a whole as well?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, when I was a younger player, if there was no league after college, or if I didn't go to college to play soccer, like, there was not many good playing opportunities overseas or anything. So, like, there were a couple good European teams maybe, but it was very limited. And just since that time, I think about the quality. One is the depth of the quality in the U.S., like how many wonderful college teams there are. Like, whereas maybe when I was coming up, there were 5 or 6 that could compete for the top spots, and now there's 20, 30. And then looking at, the depth of the professional league and the quality of players coming into the professional ranks, but also just seeing the game grow worldwide and how many countries have really good women's leagues, as well as teams that can compete in a World Cup or Olympics, like, and really compete. Whereas before, again, it would be like maybe 2 or 3 teams could possibly win it. And now it's really like any team could be any other team on a given day. And I think we see that. And so just the quality is so good. And there's so many good players out there. Whereas before, it was certainly limited to a much smaller group.
Could you talk about the NWSL Players Association and what drove you to start it?
Yeah, so actually didn't ever intend to start I didn't know what I was starting. I didn't mean for it to be as big as it ended up being, which is very important piece of the women's game in the league. But really, I just started a chain of communication with some other players. We wanted to have a couple team representatives on each team and to be able to pass information or questions to the league. So that was how it started. And very soon it evolved, it continued to grow, and there were more layers added. And so fast forward now 4 or 5 years from that initial communication, we're like a real players association, the union that represents all the players. And I didn't realize at the time kind of what we were doing as players and what we were creating. But now looking back at it, I'm so proud of the work that we have put in, myself and other active players at the time in the league, in order to get it to where it is now. And it's still at very, very early stages. But the whole idea is that, the players in the league need a voice. They need a group to represent them. And that, we're able to do that now. And it's something that we weren't able to do, 5 years ago when there was nothing like that. So it's very cool to see it evolve.
So most of the players' salary is pretty small at the time, and they might need a side job. If if the player opportunity increases, would this still be needed?
Yeah, I think we're still a while away from everybody making enough money where they don't even need to think about another job. Uh, we're at a pretty good point where there are many players who don't have second jobs, but there are still a lot who either need to do other things to supplement their income or want to. And I think that what I would say is that I hope we get to the day fairly soon where nobody needs to do other work financially, but it's still, as a professional athlete, you have the time to build something on the side and also build and prepare for when you're no longer playing. When most people in the real world say they retire, they're 65 or whatever, however old, and they're actually then can go on vacation and be done with work. When a professional athlete says they retire, you still have a whole life and career ahead of you to still work. So I think for players, I would love for nobody to need a second job, but I still think it will be relevant to be continuing your education alongside your playing, or to be doing something else and gaining other skill sets and working alongside playing in some way to build your brand or whatever it is, to then help transition to that after playing time frame.
Was it hard for you to decide what you were going to do next?
I honestly, I didn't even think of it. I didn't decide what I was going to do next, I don't think, because I actually really wanted to play for a lot more time. I thought I was going to play till I was like 40. I started Techne Futbol and the Players Association while I was playing, just because those were things I wanted to do. And I had time, after training every day, to be working on something. So I never had this vision of like, when I'm done playing, I'm going to start something totally new. I kind of knew that the work I was doing was going to eventually transition to what I would do when I wasn't able to play professionally anymore. And unfortunately, I have something called ulcerative colitis, a health condition, so that I had to step away from playing and ramp up the other things I was doing kind of in tandem to that, maybe before I was ready. But I never sat down and thought, okay, what do I want to do next? Because I was kind of already doing it. And that's why I think it's so important for anybody, whether you're playing professionally or, in high school, college, to be like working on things like, what you do, I think is amazing. You're an entrepreneur in the sense that you're setting up your own things, you're building your personal brand, you're talking about things you care about. And that's so important for everyone to be doing. That way you don't need to start fresh the second one phase of your life is over, and it can kind of transition naturally.
So what drove you to start Techne as well?
Techne kind of spun off of me sharing training ideas on YouTube and social media. I had been for a while, since I lived in Sweden, and I kind of was bored and lonely after training. I would put training videos and what I called backyard skill challenges on YouTube or on social media. And people really responded well to them. It helped me connect with people. And so I wanted to offer something a little more substantial to players, to kind of follow actual training progressions, connect with others, compete with others, track their progress. And that was where the idea for Techne really started.
Have you received any notes or heard any stories about players using Techne during times of COVID?
Oh yeah, a ton of them. I think, obviously the idea behind Techne was, from a number of years ago, that I couldn't even imagine the situation that, we're in now, we've gone through. But it ended up being a really great solution for players who were stuck at home. Like literally sometimes players couldn't even leave home, or people, were stuck in a small apartment even. And we have living room training, and all the training can be done, in a very small space. You don't have to drive anywhere or go anywhere. So because of that, it helped a ton of people to continue not just their soccer progress, but it was really important to a lot of people. I think this was what was most rewarding to me, to hear the impact it had mentally and emotionally for players when they weren't able to continue their training and were really down and struggling with their mental health because of, being stuck inside and the situation. So for me to be able to have offered something to get people through that time, and that could create excitement, ambition, and that feeling of progress when otherwise maybe that was impossible, is really rewarding.
Do you hope that other young girls are able to look at your leadership and take after your leadership style?
I mean, I would hope so. I think a big thing I'm really proud of is I talked to some others in the women's league who have started their own businesses, is that my hope is that we've shown people that you can do it. You can start your own business while you're playing, and it doesn't have to be a massive investment of money. It can start small. It can start with you building your personal brand. So kind of my leadership style has always been doing the things that I think are right, and being an example for others, and also bringing others along with me whenever I can, and doing things collaboratively, or hiring, other female players to work with me on things. So for me, I'm hoping that is something that continues, and that those players who have worked with me will also empower others, which I know they do already. So I think it's kind of like a little bit of a chain reaction.
Before I wrap up, I just want to talk about the racial issues our country faces right now. I know I've seen both you and your husband really active on social media. What are you hopeful your child grows up with?
Wow, you asked some good questions. That's really interesting, because I've thought a lot about that recently. Obviously, kind of having a baby girl pretty soon, and I think that I realize more and more how much I have to learn, and how much and that she's going to experience in the world that I did not experience as a young girl, and how our lives and upbringing, although we may, have a lot of the same values, and even living in, like, she'll grow up near where I grew up, and there'll be a lot of similarities. She will have a different experience in the world because of the color of her skin. And that's it's a really interesting thing to contemplate, and it's also a very sad thing to contemplate. So I think my hope is that I'm able to better understand what her life is like and is going to be like. And I think, that takes work on my part to understand, to have conversations. And my husband, Aaron, and I have these conversations often. And I think that's the first step. But I would also like to take meaningful action in the world more than I had done in the past to initiate change. And whether that's working through the soccer world and the avenues I have, or finding other ways. I think first step is getting educated and learning about other people's experiences, which I do very much because it's front and center in my life. But I think the second step there is taking action that actually can help create structural change. And I don't know what that looks like as of now, I'll be honest, but I would like to be more involved in taking that action whenever I'm able.
I have one very last question, which I always ask. What do you hope people remember about your impact to soccer and the world?
Wow. These are some tough ones. I hope people, I would hope that people see me as somebody who brings people together. And I think that there's a lot of strength in that. Like, I would love to be viewed as a leader in the soccer community and the world, and somebody who represents really important progress. But I think even more so than me being seen as that leader is I would like to be seen as a part of a movement. And that means that other people are involved as well. So for me to be seen as part of a movement with other people who created progress in the world through the sport of soccer, I think that's really important, whether it's with racial equality and social justice, or with, bringing the women's game to the forefront, and making sure that female athletes are respected more and paid more. Whatever it is, I think it's so important to be viewed as part of the movements that need to happen. And I'm kind of like part of a few different movements, but I guess for me, to be viewed as a leader in those areas it would be really special.
I learned a lot with Yael today. We started talking about staying determined and driven and being focused. After that, we went on to talk a little bit about bouncing back from mistakes. One thing that she said that really stood out to me is that you can get down on yourself for a day or two, but after that, you have to get up and try even harder than before. That's something I need to work on for myself. I sometimes take a while to bounce back from mistakes, and that's something that needs to get way better, especially for things like recording a podcast. I may only have 30 seconds to a minute to bounce back from a mistake I may make. One other thing Yael says when we talk about Techne for the short time we did, she says Techne is a way players can take control of their own experience. So this is good for anyone who may not have a season, or anyone who doesn't know if they're going to have a season or not, or in general, anyone that needs a little bit extra training. I would really encourage you to check out Techne because it is a great training experience. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and until next time, remember to keep the game beautiful.